Hello, I'm Sean Murray and this is The Conversation, where we take an alternative look at political events and current affairs through an Irish lens. In this show, we hope to pick, probe, investigate and uncover the stories that you want to hear. We go where mainstream won't go. On this special edition of The Conversation, we look at the life of poet, seanchaí and Irish revolutionary Bobby Sands. This Sunday will be the 43rd anniversary of Bobby's death after 66 days on hunger strike in Long Kesh prison. This week, I speak to one of Bobby's closest friends and cellmate before his death. But before we do, let's get a quick overview on this week's topic.
Bobby Sands, poet, seanchaí and revolutionary, led the 1981 hunger strike, culminating in his death along with 9 of his comrades. As early as 1962, the sectarian realities of ghetto life materialised early in Bobby's life when at the age of 10, his family were forced to move home due to loyalist intimidation. Then came 1968 and the events which were to change his life, the beginning of the conflict. As tensions heightened further, Bobby was intimidated out of an apprenticeship because he was a Catholic. In June 1972, the family were subjected to 18 months of intimidation before again being put out of their home in Rathcoole, moving to the newly built Twinbrook estate on the fringe of nationalist West Belfast. Of this time, Bobby himself later wrote, "I was only a working class boy from a nationalist ghetto, but it is repression that creates the revolutionary spirit of freedom. I shall not settle until I achieve liberation of my country, until Ireland becomes a sovereign, independent socialist republic." At 18, Bobby joined the Republican movement, later writing, "My life now centred around sleepless nights and standbys, dodging the Brits and calming nerves to go out on operations. But the people stood by us. The people not only opened their doors of their homes to lend us a hand, but they opened their hearts to us. I learned that without the people we could not survive, and I knew that I owed them everything." Bobby set himself to work tackling the social issues which affected the Twinbrook area. Here he became a community activist before being arrested in 1976. He was sentenced to 14 years for possession of a revolver. Bobby spent the first 22 days of his sentence in solitary confinement on the boards in Crumlin Road Jail before being moved to the H blocks and joining the blanket protest. He wrote, "The days were long and lonely. The sudden and total deprivation of such basic human necessities as exercise and fresh air, association with other people, my own clothes, and things like newspapers, radios, cigarettes, books, and a host of other things made my life very hard." On October 27, 1980, following the failure of talks with prison authorities, 7 prisoners in the H blocks began a hunger strike led by OC Brendan Hughes. After the breakdown of this strike, Bobby volunteered to lead a new hunger strike, with him refusing food on the 1st of March 1981. He decided that other prisoners should join the strike at staggered intervals to maximise publicity, with prisoners steadily deteriorating successively over several months. The hunger strike centred on 5 demands: the right not to wear a prison uniform, the right not to do prison work, the right of free association with other prisoners and to organise educational and recreational pursuits, the right to 1 visit, 1 letter and 1 parcel per week, and lastly, full restoration of remission lost through the protest. On March 30th, he was nominated as a candidate for the Fermanagh and South Tyrone by-election, caused by the sudden death of Frank Maguire, an independent MP who supported the prisoners' cause. Bobby won the seat on the 9th of April 1981. Just weeks later, on the 5th of May, Bobby Sands died after 66 days on hunger strike. His legacy lives on today.
And with that, I would like to introduce my next guest. Colm Scullion shared a cell with Bobby Sands before his death. They were close friends who had spent 4 years on the blanket together as part of the No Wise protest. This was introduced in 1976 in order to end special category status and replace it with a policy of criminalisation against Irish political prisoners. In response, Bobby Sands led the 1981 hunger strike that resulted in him and 9 of his comrades dying at Long Kesh prison. Colm, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks very much for inviting me here today. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Colm, how did you come to meet Bobby Sands, first of all?
Well, it was in late 76, about December 76. In October, I'd been injured in a bomb explosion, premature explosion. And as a result of that, I was taken to the Musgrave Park Military Hospital. I was there up until December and then moved to the Crumlin Road Prison Hospital and kept on there for about a week or so, and then into A-Wing in the Crum. And I can remember going to A-Wing in the Crum, and I was like, I suppose, come from the countryside and stuff and didn't know. It was all full of Belfast men and Derry City men. And I was looking out to see if I could find Tom McElwee or some of the guys that I knew. And I arrived anyway. I was in crutches. I was shown into a cell on the A-Wing, on the landing, on the bottom floor. And I shared a cell with Jimmy Burns from Andytown. Bobby, he had come then to interview me. Anybody going in then were interviewed by the army to see what they were charged with, where they're from, basically getting debriefed. And I remember this guy come to me with, I often tell people he reminded me of Donald Lunny, the sort of long hair and this typical 70s clothes on him. And he was along with Joe McDonnell. So I was interviewed then to see where I was from, what I'd been charged with, etc. And that was really the first time. Bobby was on the staff in the Crum, and on the parade out in the yard, they would have stood at the front of the men. So myself and Hector McNeil, because we were in crutches, we were put up along the staff up the front. As a result of that, boys thought that we were top ranking IRA men. Actually, we weren't. But that was the first time I'd met Bobby.
And very quickly you became friends. You'd share a cell together.
We became friends. I suppose my next big encounter with him was in the Crum. I had been attacked by loyalists, myself and Jimmy Burns, and the Screws had let the loyalists into the canteen. This was during the fight for segregation, when loyalist prisoners, and they were trying to mix us and the loyalists together. We were killing all on the outside, but they had let the loyalists into the canteen first of all in A-Wing and A1, and they come to our cell. Me and Jimmy were in a cell halfway up the wing, and they let us out into the canteen, and a couple of hoods allowed them in. So we went into the canteen, and it was just very, very tense atmosphere. And then they threw all their steel trays at us. I couldn't run. Jimmy managed to get to the door, and I couldn't run. I got halfway to the door, badly injured, my injuries from the explosion. But anyway, cut long story short, I ended up being put in the back of a paddy wagon and taken to the Mater Hospital. But prior to that, Bobby then, and he was OC up on top of in the threes, so he attacked the loyalists, or they attacked the loyalists there. And Bobby was put in the same paddy wagon along with me. So the two of us ended up in the Mater Hospital, where we were treated for injuries and stuff. So would that be sort of an early bond at that stage? And I think that maybe, I remember checking newspaper archives in recent years, and I think that may have been the first week in January that happened. So that was my introduction to Bobby then, and I knew him from that day up until he died.
And just for the viewers' sake, can you give us a bit of context to what the No Wise protest was about and how you ended up with Bobby on that protest?
Yeah, well, we political prisoners had certain rights or privileges, whatever you want to call it, but one of them was the right to wear your own clothes, not a prison uniform, the right to free education, free association. So the British government decided to do away with that on March the 1st, 1976. So at the end of February 1976, you got all these things. So they said, no, you're not a political prisoner anymore, you're a convict. So we said, no, we're not going to wear the prison uniform. And So the first guy on the protest was Kieran Nugent, and the protest wasn't planned as such. It developed, and Kieran, he said he wasn't wearing it. And it was a famous quote. He says, "You'll have to nail it to my back." And it started with Kieran, and I know locally, one of the local guys around south there we were from was Paul McGlinchey, and Paul's one of the first guys on it too. And sadly, neither two of them are no longer with us. So prior to the no wash protest, we were getting attacked by the screws. So you're going out to use the toilet and you're getting beat up, and then you're forced into your cells. And then we started using the piss pots in the cell. They were coming around collecting the piss, etc. The protest escalated into the non-wash. We refused to wash, and it was quite tough. I often remember, like with all long hair, we hadn't washed or shaved, and the hair was quite long. Most of the boys had beards. I hadn't got a beard. I had half a beard. I remember that. But the hair cleaned itself after about 6 weeks, and your skin, like there was dirt sticking to your skin, and after a while it started to peel off, self-cleanse itself. But the no wash protest was quite difficult, and then it went from that then to putting our own dirt on the cell walls and the ceiling and stuff, and then the screws would come in every 2 weeks to clean the cells with power hose and stuff. So they'd move us from a clean wing to from a dirty wing to a clean wing, and how they moved us was you were dragged out of the cell, you were run through a gauntlet of screws with battens and boots and stuff, 2 rows of them. We were coming naked, dragged across that, put on the top of a table, your legs pulled apart, probed, maybe insert something inside you, stick their fingers down your throat, punched and slapped about. Some of the guys ended up with broken noses, broken ribs. Martin Horson who died in hunger strike, he got a disc kicked out of his back. So this brutality was going on and going on. This was the background, I suppose, to the hunger strike. And I remember in our case in H3 was the like all the blocks were brutal, but H3 was the most brutal, and I think it's because probably we were the youngest prisoners. There seemed to be quite a lot of very young prisoners in 3, and they thought they could break us, and then therefore break the whole protest. But it didn't work. Yeah, I remember Bobby and Bick in the dark, and Big Tom and them. They were moved from whatever blocks they were in into our wing in H3, and when they arrived in H3, the only way I can describe it was an awful air of depression. There was a massive, massive black cloud hanging over not only our wing, like our entire block, and there was no end in sight. It was just so mundane, the monotony of it. You didn't know what day it was. One day rolled onto the now, you didn't know what week it was, you didn't know what month it was. Absolute boredom. Like remember, you were in a cell with a towel. You had a towel, you had 3 blankets, you had a plastic mug, a gallon of water, 6 pieces of toilet paper you were allowed a day, and a Bible, and a mattress on the ground. There was no mental outlet, no nothing. And we just made our own, amusement among ourselves, telling stories, singing, slagging each other off. That was it. You couldn't even see anything. You'd look out the cell and you'd look through the concrete bars, and then there's wire on the other side of that, and then more wire. And if you've seen a bird, it was a novelty. So the Dark and Bobby and these boys, they come down to our wing, and this was the kind of atmosphere. But the morale was 0. And I remember, I'll never forget when they arrived, Dark accused, I can't remember who the OC of our wing was, but Dark accused got the OC that night to go around to ask each prisoner, just ask them their story, what's happened to you. And go to each cell, and Dark accused was shocked when he heard what was going on. And they, like, even though they were in another block and they were being brutalised as well, it was to a different level that we were being brutalised. I think it was at that point that the Dark knew that this cannot go on, something had to give. And at Mass then on Sunday, we were allowed out to Mass on a Sunday, which meant wearing the prison trousers. You walked a few yards down the wing into the canteen, and there was a big powwow. The Mass was going on, and Bobby and the Dark and the other staff in the wing and the block got together and they started talking and thrashing things out. So decisions were being taken at that stage that the protests had to go move one way or another, and it was really, really down to the brutality. The guards, a lot of the screws would have come in drunk. They had loyalist tattoos over them. We were at their total disposal. They could do whatever they want. And I remember one screw in particular going to a few cells down. It was Danny Clark. Danny Clark was in it, and they took Danny out. I think I think they left the imprint of a ring on his face and his head where they punched him. But that's what's going on all the time. Kevin Lynch, who later died in a hunger strike, was suffering from pyorrhea. And he'd went to the Screws, put a request in to see the doctor. The doctor told him, ask the Screws, he says, for some salt to wash your mouth out. That's as good as anything. And Kevin done that. And Kevin was put in a cell. And I remember there was always a ghostly silence in the wing. But I remember hearing the gates closing at the end of the wing and the feet coming down the wing. And it was the PO of our block, Paddy Joe. Most of the guys will know, they'll all know who he is. And he came down to Kevin's cell with 2 or 3 other Screws, and next thing he heard was punching and moaning and punching and kicking. And poor Kevin, they held him down, they stood on the ground, they stood on his shoulders and they squeezed his mouth open and they poured a plastic mug full of salt onto him. Then they washed it down with water, poured the gallon of water over him and said, there's your salt. So this was going on all the time. This just wasn't one incident. There was numerous incidents like this. So this was the backdrop to the decisions that were made then on escalating the protest one way or another.
So on that, something we had spoke about earlier on, it wasn't just physical brutality. You told me a story about what they'd done with the food. Yeah, the food was one probably their big way of getting back to you. Like we got 6 rounds of bread a day, a wee bit of margarine, and then that was spread throughout the day, like two slices in the morning and maybe 4 in the evening. So you got your breakfast, a bowl of porridge with your bread pushed into the middle of the porridge, and the water was mixed, or the milk was mixed with water, and then you got a cup of tea along with that. Lunchtime, you got your basic lunch. It could be a wee salad or something, and then in the evening your dinner and that. But they would come to your door with a big plate and a small plate, and we refused to take it off them. They pushed it on the floor. But we would divide everything equally among ourselves. But this was trying to cause friction at the very, very core of the protest, to try and have 2 guys fighting with each other over the food and stuff. But that didn't work. I remember one time we were just weren't talking about food. We were violently sick, and all the men in the wing were very, very, very sick and very ill, vomit and stuff. And we didn't find out until recent years that apparently the Screws caught 2 rats, or the orderlies caught 2 rats, and they boiled them in our soup, and we were actually eating cooked rats. And I had heard then that the OC had found out about it. Some of the orderlies had told him, and he'd asked for a request to see the PO, and just told him straight that, he was, I don't know what words he said, but he never told us. He didn't want us to know. But you hear things in later years. Yeah, and I remember then one time going to a car boot sale in Antrim and walking around the stalls, and I recognised the Screw, but we made eye contact at the same time. He recognised me and I recognised him, and he had a young fellow with him, and I think it must have been his son. And I'll be honest about it, he wasn't the worst. He took no part in the brutality, but he didn't want me talking to him in front of the son. And he said, "Oh, hello, young Scullion." I said, "Hello, John." Right, "How are you?" And he said, "I'm okay." And we just looked at each other, and he says, "Listen, do you want to go for a walk around the stalls?" So we went for a walk, and he was quite apologetic about the brutality of what was going on. And I said to myself, "You've not apologised. You didn't do anything." And then he said, "Well, there's a lot of other stuff happened that you don't know about." And I said, "Like, what do you mean?" He said, "Your food." So this stuff about the food started coming out. And but listen, we ate everything in front of us. I remember there's the MEPs were coming in for a visit, and they'd come into my cell, and they'd asked me if there was anything I didn't eat. And I said, eggshells and chicken bones. And there was nothing else you could, we were starving all the time. And it got that bad, I'd lost a lot of weight, and I'm down to 6 stone weight, less than half the weight I am now. And I ended up in the prison hospital. And I didn't know what medication they were giving me, but it must have been steroids. I got 2 injections a day for a month, and then I was sent back up to the protests again, and I had muscles all over the place. So it must have been steroids, but I wasn't on my own. Like most of the guys were just losing weight. We were allowed either an apple or an orange a week, and that was the total fruit you got. So 1 apple or 1 orange a week, and that was a bit of a novelty. There's a wee cake. They would give you a piece of cake in the evening with your tea. We called it kiss de bouille, yellow cake, because that's what it was, but there's no taste of it. But we had squashed it up into dough,
and we put it along the bottom of the cell door, and we were pouring out the piss pots at night, and that stopped it from coming in. And then the screws would come with the squeezes and try and push it back in again. But it was useful for that way. We blocked up the door so they couldn't put the piss back in around us again. But the food was a big thing, messing around with your food. But it didn't work.
And under these conditions, these appalling conditions, Bobby Sands was able to write poetry. He was a great storyteller, which is a matter of public record. I mean, his poems now have been shared all over the world. How was he able to do that under those conditions?
Well, firstly, when Bobby and that group of men come to our wing, they injected new life into the wing. Bobby seen what was going on. He seen the conditions. He seen what our mental situation was like. And it was, the Irish classes were going. There were sing songs and that. Bobby would have had new songs that nobody else would have had. So they're putting a big input of new material and life into the wing. But Bobby, I was lucky enough to be in the cell with him when he was very prolific at his writing. Yeah, the cells would have been covered in excrement, our own excrement, but we'd have left a wee place clean, about a foot square, just beside your mattress on the ground, either side, and a place at the door. And that was where all the writing was taking place. And would have been used for the Irish classes. Sometimes would have drawn out a draft board, and you're trying to play drafts. And we were writing with the lead of a pencil, and they were smuggled in during the visits, just a wee lead of a pencil. But Bobby would have been writing a lot of his poetry in these places, and if he thought it was good enough, then it was transcribed onto a piece of toilet paper and then smuggled out of the prison. Even today, there's still some of Bobby's work are still turned up. People have them privately, but there's still bits and pieces you'll hear of something else turning up. But anyway, I had told him many a story, and we were sharing stories, and he was intrigued by the countryside and the country way of life, and he'd been questioning about farming and just different wee things. I had told him the story of Roddy McCorley, the United Irishman, who took part in the Battle of Antrim, and the story had gone down through our family, and it was quite a well-known figure in our area. But anyway, as an acknowledgement, Bobby wrote me the poem Roddy McCorley, and it was 19 verses long, I think, and as a thank you, he mentions me in the poem. So I tell people the story and they don't believe me. But the line or the verse started off as, "'Twas at Cross Keys," and that's the Cross Keys pub. "'Twas at Cross Keys the pipes gleamed white, neath a telling yellow moon, as the common folk and there the poacher's son went out to meet their doom." And I was the poacher's son, and that part is in brackets in the poem. And myself and my father would have been, I'll not call it poaching, we were fishing for salmon and eels in Loch Beg and River Ban. And that was the other stories I was telling him. So that was his way of thanking me. But the poem itself...
and you're wearing the Cross Keys t-shirt now?
I just like to mention this in memory of my friend Paddy. Paddy's one of my best friends, and he died of motor neuron a year past in September. And this was my inheritance from Paddy. I think we were part shareholders of the Cross Keys. But anyway, so Bobby, I had the poem and the original, Bobby's handwriting, and I sent it out home. And then I donated it to the Bobby Sands Trust, and it's now in Dublin, in the National Library in Dublin. I felt it was too valuable to have lying around the house, and so it's better it's put away somewhere for the people of Ireland to see. Like I was giving him, he was asking me about the names of the places around home that Macaulay would have seen or whatever, or what it was like around Scullion, and he would just use that as a basis then to start writing. And there's different parts in the poem, like you would swear the man was there himself. And the sun set red on Slieve Gallion Braes, and the jackdaw hidden shame, and the primrose wept for Roddy boy, for Macaulay Og was slain. And all along the Largy lane a woman wails, and tonight she'll roam the glen, O Roddy of Deneen, Macaulay Antrim born, will ere we meet again. And if you're standing at our door in Ballyscullion, Slieve Gallion Braes is behind you, and the Largy lane, the second road, you go to the Cross Keys, and it's in the other direction, and he was capturing that, even though he never was there.
Amazing.
Amazing. Very, very gifted, very talented.
And tell me this, how does it feel in the aftermath of Bobby's death, and many, many years later, he was a good friend of yours, that someone like that has become an icon all around the world, and it's I'm sure it's kind of half removed because it's very personal to you. How did that fit?
I find it, God, sometimes you have to pinch yourself, and it didn't really it didn't really hit me until back like some years ago. I'd come to Pat McKeown was a good friend of mine, and I'd come up for Pat McKeown's funeral. And went to the funeral and stuff, and went to the Felons Club afterwards for a cup of tea, and Tom Hartley was there, who was later Mayor of Belfast, and Tom had come over to me and he says, come on, introduce you to some friends of mine from Dublin. And I think there were politicians, maybe councillors, I don't know what party they belonged to, but they had known about Pat and the tremendous work he'd done on the Shankill and the Falls, bringing people together. And Tom said to me, he said, these people want to hear, they want to hear your story about Bobby and that. But he went on to say, Colm, who'd you have loved to have met in 1916? And I studied for a moment, and I said, God, well, anybody who's in the GPO, don't know who or what they are, anybody who's in the GPO who can give me an eyewitness account of what was going on. He said, you were in the GPO. And I just remember thinking to myself, and the hair stood in the back of my neck, and at that moment the penny dropped. I wasn't belittling the death or not realising the significance of it, but that was the benchmark. I just thought after that, the significance and importance of it. So I had a chat with these guys, they're lovely guys, and they're asking loads of questions, probably similar stuff that you're asking now. And from then on, chiefly through Danny Morrison, I get a lot of students coming to me looking, doing interviews, helping with university work. A young lady come all the way from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and she was studying Bobby's poetry and writing, and she dissected it, every word. And we would sit down. She actually come to Ballyscone and interviewed me, and I spent about a year with her online. Yeah, I'll tell you a strange story. Hela, the young lady from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, had been in touch with me about Bobby's poetry and that, and I was working in the Monkstown, Carrickfergus area, an area I still don't know it too well. But she'd phoned one day, and I was driving the van, and she'd phoned, and I said, listen, Hela, just stay on the line there, give me 2 seconds, and I'll pull in here. So I pulled the van over at the side of the road, and she said, McComb, said a very quick question. She says, one of Bobby's poems, he mentions a place called Tripper's Lane. She says, do you know it? I said, God, I've never heard of it, I'm not familiar with it. As I was talking to her, I just happened to turn around to my left and looked, and there was a sign in the road saying Tripper's Lane.
That's incredible. And
I just, God, and that, that gave me the creeps, to be honest. I was never on that road in my life, and this girl rings me from halfway around the planet, asked me to know where this road's at, and now I'm sitting parked on it. And there'll be things that keep happening. I'm not saying it's anything spiritual or whatever, but there'll be things I can't explain, But yeah, she went on and got her doctorate, and likewise there's loads of students have come forward over the years, and people writing books and doing documentaries and movies and stuff. But it's important these stories are collected and survive for future generations. Absolutely, and we mustn't lose sight of the fact that today, the legislation, the Bill of Shame, has been enacted today by the British government, which makes it almost impossible for families to attain some semblance of truth about their loved ones. Yeah, inquests have been closed down, civil cases have been closed down. So we have to tell our own stories, Colm, and your story, amongst others. I mean, it's so important that people, for future generations, to archive our own stories and let people know. Yeah, it is very, very important, because one of my hobbies is local history and genealogy. I'm always recording stuff and writing down. And I remember, probably as a result of people like Bobby and Jake Jackson teaching us the Irish, when I come home I was fairly fluent, I was able to have a conversation. But I went around the farmers in Ballyscone with an ordnance survey map, collecting all the field names. And this was 35 years ago. And a lot of them were in Irish. Beautiful, beautiful Irish, Crochan and Yim, Crocha Wee, Crochan Ure, and never recorded before. And I got them all down on the ordnance survey map. But that was an offshoot of what was coming from the blocks. So I felt it was important to record them as it is to record the stories about Bobby. And I say, it's Bobby and all the guys that were teaching the Irish were responsible for situations like that. There was a story that when we had been chatting earlier, and it brings it home, because it might be 43 years ago, but I'm sure it's like yesterday to you, Colm. You had an old friend of yours and Bobby's that had turned up to your house one time without saying who it was. It's so raw and so vivid sometimes, I'm sure. I mean, you telling me that story just encapsulates
how it is? It must feel like yesterday.
It was quite tough. I get emotional done it sometimes, but a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine from West Belfast here, and I'll not mention names, but one Sunday morning he phoned me, and they all called me Skull, short for Skull. Skull says, "Where do you live at?" In Butality, the Belfast way of saying it. And I give him directions and stuff, and then he hadn't, took a Belfast man out of Belfast. He can get to Dungormy after that, he might as well be in Timbuktu. But I met him at the Elk Bar, and he followed me home and went up to the front door of the house, and he just burst into tears crying. And he said to me, "They all died, didn't they?" And that was very tough. But yeah, it's different. There's a lot of happy, sad memories. Like the night when Bobby did, when he died, we never thought for a moment that Bobby was going to die. And like when he was on the wing, on the night he went on hunger strike, got up and he made a speech to us. I remember one of the things he said was, "I'm not dying for 5 demands. There's more at stake here." So the war is at stake, the whole struggle is at stake. And like, we'd been slagging him. "Fuck, 6 ways up, you're not going to die." We never one moment thought that we'd let him die. And the night he did die, or the morning he died, I was in a cell with Ricky. Bick was 2 cells down. And I have this written word for word in a column at home that I give my mother. I just give her an account of that night. And Bick got up to the window. Bick had the radio. And I had Bobby's, I was one of Bobby's carriers of the radio as well. But Bick got up to the window and he shouted up, he just shouted a couple of cells up, "Skull, restart, suicide and Inyog. For Robert Bass, a couple of moments in. Bobby died a couple of minutes ago." And if I remember correctly, I have it written in the column that his death, he died at 14 minutes past 1, and it was officially declared at 17 minutes past 1 or something like that. But I've it all down word for word in a wee column, and my mum saved, God love her, she saved all them wee columns for me, and there's a makings of a book there. But that night was like getting hit with a train. You just bang, it's happened. And we didn't want to shout or tell, I remember one of the things was we couldn't waken anybody up, everybody was sleeping. And if you started banging the walls too much, the screws would have caught on, there was something up. And we eventually did then start passing word around that he had died. But it was so tense the next morning. It was just an awful environment. And I remember years later talking to Bick about it. And Bick had told me about the last time he had seen Bobby. It was down in the prison hospital. And Bick was allowed to see him, I think it was once, and to more or less tell him what was going on. There was some of these commissions or talks or something going on, but Bick came down to tell him that there was no movement, nothing happening. And I said, "Bick, what was it like? What was he like?" He said, "Skull," he said, "he was just lying in the bed." He says, "It was like a heap of rags." And his voice was going and his vision wasn't good. And Bobby asked Bick who was it? And he says, "It's me, it's Bick here." And I think the last thing he said to Bick was, "Bick, I'm dying, Macara. I'm dying, Macara. I'm dying, my friend, I'm dying." And that was it. So Bick, one tough guy, and to go and witness that and to carry that with you, very, very difficult.
Thinking about all these years later, what is Bobby Sands' legacy as a friend, and look at it from your angle? What's his legacy now?
Well, one of the ways I look at it, like we were ordinary prisoners, well, we weren't ordinary prisoners, we were political prisoners, and in the wing, people like Bobby, and I always mention Tommy McKierney, coming into the wing and politicising us. Now, we were politicised, but pushing it into us, right? And lads getting out of prison, getting involved in community politics, setting up different tenants associations all over the north, even in wee areas. We in South Derry now, Sinn Féin have opened up, they have a constituency office, and it's second to none, money raised locally. And that all politics started in the wing. Like, it wasn't just a military war, you had to bring the politics along with it. And it was people like Bobby, Tommy, the Dark, all them guys, collectively, everything was discussed, all the isms, socialism, communism, capitalism, these were all thrashed out. And there's hundreds of us back out into the community bringing all this information with us. And I think that's what the legacy is today, like where it's brought us to. Like I know, like when Bobby talked about the community associations that he was involved in Twinbrook. Yeah, and that was people's politics on the ground, dealing with everyday issues. And I remember in later years when the elections were in Mid-Ulster, the SDLP had a seat in Mid-Ulster and they had no constituency office. Like, where's that? Like, what's that about? And yet, when Republicans run, Sinn Féin run, there was offices opened up all over the place. People had somewhere to deal with their issues, but a lot of that goes back to the blocks. Us guys all getting out. Some didn't bother, but they're all politicised. Myself and Bobby would talk about things we'll do when we get out and that, and whatever. And I remember talking to Smaller about this many years ago. We were going to go to Donegal and brush up on our Irish and stuff. But he always said if ever he had a daughter, he would call her Aisling. And my eldest daughter's Aisling, and she was named after him. And so there's wee things like that everyday reminders. They're all around you,
Well, Colm, I want to thank you for coming in. Don't
Thank you.
underestimate how important it is for that story to be heard.
Yeah.
He's an internationally renowned revolutionary, an icon to many, many people around the world.
Yeah.
If we look at what's happening in Palestine at the
Yeah,
minute,
exactly.
And you were in the middle of it.
Yeah,
And
well, just a wee footnote, if you don't mind. I remember less than a year ago, I had a lady come to stay with us at home. She didn't know anything about my background. And she was from Nova Scotia, her and her husband and daughter. And I'd asked her, like, what brings you to Ireland? And I want to see the scenery and stuff, but her husband was a documentary maker. But she told me she was a student at school when Bobby Sands was on a hunger strike. And I told her then my connection with Bobby. And she couldn't, like, I thought for a moment she thought I was winding her up. And I had actually shown some physical evidence. And but to me, for someone coming halfway across the planet, that this man, this legend, is very much in the tip of their tongue. It's just really, it speaks for itself.
Colm, thanks again for coming in. And don't underestimate the power of that story. You should be very, very proud of yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
And that does it for another week. We'd love for you to join the conversation by sharing the link to today's programme to help us grow our audience across all our social media platforms. I'd like to once again thank our special guest, Colm Scullion. In the meantime, the conversation will be back next week with more investigations and analysis. I'm Sean Murray. Bye for now.